What's going on, everybody? So I figured I would start today's video off with having a conversation about training and the type of training that I like to do before major matches. So a lot of people I have noticed training recently, especially before their matches, they only have one type of training. And what I mean by one type of training is they almost always just stand and bang targets. They just practice their fundamentals. They practice aiming the gun. They practice their grip. They practice all of these fundamental things, which are 1,000,000% perfect. But one thing I notice that they don't do is they don't really practice execution. They don't really work on the fundamentals of what you're going to actually do at a match, entering, exiting, all the timing things that are the most important things when it comes to actually winning a major match or even a match in general. The other thing about shooting those stages where you're just standing and banging and you're just sending rounds down range on a bunch of static targets is you tend to get in a rhythm. You tend to understand what pace you can shoot the sights at. So now you limit yourself as to how fast you are supposed to be shooting or can be shooting on those targets. So instead of really trying to get at it and maybe push those sights, understanding that, all right, cool, that was an acceptable sight picture, I got an alpha, you're gonna stay at that same pace and never really push past that. The other thing is by not changing your positioning, you are going to get very comfortable and you're gonna start to basically memorize how to transition into that target, how to get that gun into that target. You're gonna always keep a great grip because you're never breaking your grip. You're just constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again. Now imagine how good you would be if you shot 500 rounds doing the same drills over and over and over again. Now imagine you have to run into a 35-yard mini popper and you didn't practice the entry coming into a mini popper. And now you're going to be impatient, or now you're going to stand there forever and waiting for the gun to calm down. You're not going to understand what that timing is to come in on that very long shot or that no shoot or whatever it is because you've just been standing around shooting. So the way I like to practice is I will set up a stage, well, whatever it is. I don't even call it a stage because I'm not setting up these elaborate stages, but I will set up a couple of fault lines. I will set up a couple of walls or barrels, whatever it is, just to kind of give me that visual barrier. And then I will run this stage different every single time. And the reason I do that is because I'm working on execution. And what I mean by execution is I am really focusing on what I would be doing at a major and what I need to be thinking about while I'm at that major. So let's start with stage planning, especially for IPSC. So this has really kind of struck home that I'm on the right path with what my training has been. So I was able to go over to a buddy's range and set up, basically it was one berm. We really didn't have 3 berms. We only had 1 berm, but we were able to manipulate the stages and make it with 3 berms, giant transitions, all these different movements because of the way we set the stage up. But what we did is we took turns setting up stages or stage plans. So we would say, all right, you could only shoot these steel from this side, then you had to come over here and shoot this paper from here, then you had to come back or whatever it was always a different stage plan. And I forced us to have only 4 minutes during that stage plan to get ready. And I noticed the farther we went in, especially on day 2, because day 2, when we came back, I ended up having to set it up in a different way so nobody would steal the equipment that we had out on the ground. But on day 2, I noticed that I would give us 4 minutes and we would have the stage plan in 2 instead of 3 or almost 4 like we did the day before. So it ended up making me understand that I'm on the right path because I also started to see a difference in my focus on every single stage. It was like we ran a different match or a different stage every single time we walked up to that line. Now, by doing that, it allowed me to focus on my own shooting instead of just trying to run the stage over and over and over again. I was able to stop, take a few minutes by changing that stage plan, and I was able to really get mentally locked in for that very next stage. So understanding that the reason you run stages, or, you know, semi-stages, however you want to look at it, for a match, before a match, is your focus should be on execution before a major match. It's not on learning how to shoot. It's not on learning how to get better. You already are the shooter before you go to that major match. So if you don't already have a good grip, you're not going to learn it 2 days before the major. It's not going to happen. If you're inaccurate, you're not going to learn that 2 days before the major. You are what you are as you go to that match. So the biggest thing about training is you have to change the way you train and find different ways to train, even if you think what you have is working. There are always better ways to train than what you already do. I personally like being dynamic and moving around and changing my stage, changing up the stage every single time and running a different stage. I like to challenge myself mentally, physically, as well as on and off the range or on and off that stage while I'm shooting. I force myself to refocus on every single stage plan instead of just running the same thing over and over again. One last thing, because a lot of people don't listen to what I'm saying. There is nothing wrong with doing standing and banging drills where you're just shooting the gun and you're standing and shooting. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong with that is when that's all you do. So the last day, I've had 2 days of running around like a maniac, shooting stages. I probably have shot 3 or 4 IPSC matches easily in the last 2 days. I mean, that's how much we shot in the last 2 days, getting ready for this major. Day number 3, my legs were beat. I was exhausted, didn't get a lot of sleep, been driving a ton to get to these practices, just absolutely beat up. On day 3, I shot almost everything standing still. I had very, very minimal movement. Couple of steps left, couple of steps right, some entries, some exits, but not running stages. I didn't even put up a wall, didn't put up a port, didn't put up anything. I just stood and put all the targets out in front of me, left, right, just all over the place. 35-yard shots, 25-yard, like ridiculous no-shoot targets to shoot at. All this difficult stuff. And the reason I did that is because I went right back to the same training, just no movement. I was able to do the exact same training by just changing the stage plan around on every single stage, but I stood. You have to be dynamic in your training. You have to think about how are you going to do this at a major match? How am I going to do this at the match if that's what you're training for? Because if you don't train the way you have to execute in a major, you're not going to execute at a major. Change up your thought process. If what you're doing has only got you where you're at, you have to change the way you think to get to the next level. All right, guys, if you have any questions, hit me up in those comments, and I'll see you on the range.